Commander Zara Vex stood at the observation deck of Haven's Edge Station watching the human transport ship dock with her station. Her blue-scaled hands gripped the rail tighter than usual. In 30 years of military service across 12 different worlds, she had commanded soldiers from every species in the Galactic Defense Coalition. Altarians like herself were known for their tactical minds and steady nerves. The reptilian Karathi brought raw strength and endurance. The insectoid Vrex had perfect coordination and hive mind efficiency. Each species had their place in the grand military machine, but humans were different. The reports she had read were confusing and contradictory. Some called them reckless, others said they were brilliant improvisers. High Command wanted her to evaluate their potential for integration into coalition forces. She had agreed to take the first human military exchange unit, but she had her doubts. The airlock hissed open and the humans began filing through. They were smaller than she had expected, their skin pale and soft-looking compared to her armored hide. Their leader stepped forward and saluted in the coalition style. He was average height with brown hair and calm green eyes. "Commander Vex, Lieutenant Jake Morrison, reporting for duty," he said. His voice was steady, but she could hear something else underneath. Not fear exactly, but awareness. He knew he was being judged. "Welcome to Haven's Edge," Lieutenant Zara replied, studying him carefully. "I trust your journey was acceptable." "Yes, ma'am. My team is ready to begin integration training immediately." She nodded and gestured for him to follow. As they walked through the station corridors, she pointed out key areas: medical bay, armory, training facilities, living quarters. The other humans followed behind, looking around with obvious curiosity. They asked questions about everything, not just military protocols, but how the artificial gravity worked, what the strange plants in the hydroponics bay were for, why the walls were colored the way they were. "Your people seem very inquisitive," Zara observed. Jake smiled. "We like to understand how things work. It helps us adapt." They reached the human quarters, which had been specially modified with Earth atmosphere and gravity. The humans began unpacking their equipment with efficient movements. Zara watched them work, noting how they helped each other without being asked. When one soldier struggled with a heavy case, 2 others immediately moved to assist. "We will begin with standard evaluation procedures tomorrow," she told Jake. "Physical fitness, weapons proficiency, tactical simulations, nothing too challenging. We're ready for whatever you need, Commander." That night, Zara reviewed the human files again. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, xenobiologist with impressive academic credentials, but no military experience. Captain Rex Stone, security specialist with combat experience on 3 different worlds. The others were mostly young soldiers with basic training. On paper, they seemed capable, but unremarkable. The next morning brought their first test. A routine power failure in Section 7 had triggered emergency protocols. Standard procedure called for evacuation of non-essential personnel, while engineering teams restored the systems. It was a simple drill they had done hundreds of times, but Jake Morrison did not follow standard procedure. While the other teams methodically worked through their checklists, Jake grabbed a maintenance kit and headed directly into the affected section. Zara followed, curious about his deviation from protocol. She found him in a maintenance shaft, surrounded by exposed conduits and flashing warning lights. "Lieutenant, this area is restricted during power failures," she said. "I know, Commander, but I think I can fix this faster than waiting for the engineering crew." He was doing something with a handheld device, connecting wires in a pattern she had never seen before. "The power coupling is just overloaded. If I reroute the flow through the secondary grid and bypass the damaged relay, we can restore power in about 10 minutes. That is not approved procedure. The safety protocols exist for good reasons. You're right, and I'm being careful, but there are people stuck in the elevators, and the medical bay is running on emergency power." Sometimes you have to take calculated risks. Zara watched him work. His hands moved with confidence, despite the complexity of the system. He was improvising solutions using equipment in ways that violated every maintenance manual she knew. Yet, somehow, his jury-rigged connections held. The lights flickered and came back on. The ventilation system hummed back to life. Power was restored to the entire section. "How did you know that would work?" she asked. "I didn't know for sure, but I understood the principles involved, and I was willing to try. The worst that could happen was, it wouldn't work, and we'd be back where we started." The next test came during a simulated combat exercise. Coalition forces were defending a civilian station against hostile raiders. Each team had assigned positions and specific objectives. The drill was designed to test coordination and following orders under pressure. Jake's team was assigned to guard the eastern docking bay. Simple defensive position, low priority sector. But 15 minutes into the exercise, Zara heard Jake's voice over the communications channel. "Command, this is Morrison. I'm repositing my team to assist with civilian evacuation in Section 4. Negative, Lieutenant. Maintain your assigned position." "Commander, there are families trapped in the collapsed corridor. The rescue teams are overwhelmed. We can help. Your orders are to hold the docking bay." There was a pause. Then Jake's voice came back, quieter, but determined. "Understood, Command. But I'm going anyway." Zara watched the tactical display as Jake's team markers moved away from their assigned position. They were heading directly into the most dangerous part of the simulated battle zone. She could court-martial him for disobeying direct orders, but she was also curious to see what he would do. The exercise monitors showed Jake's team reaching the trapped civilians. Working together, they cleared debris and guided families to safety. When enemy raiders broke through the defense line and threatened the evacuation route, Jake's team held them off with fierce determination. They took heavy simulated casualties, but kept fighting until the last civilian was safe. After the exercise ended, Zara called Jake to her office. He stood at attention, clearly expecting disciplinary action. "You disobeyed direct orders," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "You abandoned your assigned position." "Yes, ma'am." "You put your team at unnecessary risk." "I put my team where they were needed." "Most, Commander." Zara studied his face. No defiance, no apology. Just quiet conviction that he had done the right thing. "In my experience, lieutenant soldiers who cannot follow orders are dangerous to their units and their missions. With respect, Commander, soldiers who cannot think for themselves are dangerous to everyone they're supposed to protect." She had seen battle-hardened soldiers from a dozen different species, warriors who could fight for days without rest, tacticians who could calculate complex strategies in seconds, specialists who could handle any weapon or technology. But she had never seen anything quite like this human who seemed to measure success, not by completing objectives, but by protecting others. "Report to Training Bay 7 tomorrow at 0800 hours, she said finally. "We have more tests to run." "Yes, ma'am." As Jake left her office, Zara realized she was looking forward to seeing what he would do next. For the first time in years, she was genuinely curious about a soldier under her command. These humans might be more interesting than she had expected. 3 weeks later, Commander Zara Vex led a joint patrol mission into the Helix Nebula region. Intelligence reports indicated increased raider activity along the trading routes, and High Command wanted a mixed species unit to investigate. The mission would test how well humans could integrate with coalition forces in real combat situations. The patrol ship moved through the colorful gas clouds of the nebula, its sensors scanning for signs of trouble. Zara commanded from the bridge, while Jake Morrison coordinated the human squad from the tactical station. The team included Sergeant Lisa Carter, a demolitions expert who seemed to enjoy working with explosives a little too much, and Private Danny Walsh, a medic who carried more medical supplies than seemed physically possible. Sub-Commander Crix, Her Altarian tactical officer studied the sensor readings with typical methodical precision. "Commander, we are detecting debris field at coordinates 74 Mark II. Configuration suggests recent combat. Take us there. Standard approach," Zara ordered, as they moved closer. The debris field resolved into the scattered remains of a merchant vessel. Hull plating drifted in the void alongside cargo containers and personal belongings. But the most disturbing sight was the small escape pod transmitting a distress signal. "Life signs detected," reported the sensor operator. "Weak but stable. Prepare a rescue team," Zara commanded. But before anyone could respond, new contacts appeared on the screen. 3 raider ships dropped out of hyperspace, moving fast toward the disabled escape pod. "Battle stations," Zara announced. "All hands prepare for combat." The raiders' ships were fast and well armed, but the Coalition patrol vessel had better shields and more experienced gunners. The battle began with long-range weapons fire as both sides maneuvered for advantage. The escape pod was caught in the middle, too damaged to move but still transmitting desperate pleas for help. "We need to get to that pod before the raiders do," Jake said over the communications channel. "Agreed," Zara replied. "But they have us outnumbered and outmaneuvered. We need to disable their ships first." The tactical situation was complex. The raiders were using the debris field as cover, making accurate weapons fire difficult. Meanwhile, the escape pod was running out of power and life support. Time was running out for whoever was trapped inside. Jake studied the tactical display for a moment, then turned to his team. "Lisa, how long would it take you to rig a portable breaching charge?" "About 2 minutes. Why?" "Danny, can you handle emergency medical treatment in zero gravity?" "I've done it before. Not fun, but doable." Zara watched this exchange with growing concern. She recognized the look in Jake's eyes. He was planning something that would probably violate every safety protocol in the book. "Lieutenant, what are you thinking?" she asked. "The raiders are jamming our transporter systems, so we can't beam anyone off that pod. But if I can get close enough in a fighter craft, I might be able to disable their lead ship's engines from the inside. That is a suicide mission. Not if I'm careful. Their ship design has weak points in the engine compartment. Lisa can give me the charges I need, and Danny can help with the rescue once we clear the raiders." Zara felt her scales tighten with frustration. "Lieutenant, I forbid this action. We will find another way." "Commander, with respect, we don't have time for another way. Those people in the pod have maybe 20 minutes of air left." The battle continued around them. The Coalition ship traded fire with the raiders while the escape pod drifted helplessly in the crossfire. Every minute that passed made rescue less likely. "I'm going," Jake announced, heading for the fighter bay. "Morrison, that is a direct order. Stand down." Jake paused at the doorway. "Commander, I understand you're trying to protect me, but protecting me won't save the people in that pod. Sometimes the mission requires personal risk." Before Zara could respond, Jake was gone. She watched the tactical display as a small fighter craft launched from their ship and accelerated toward the raider formation. The enemy ships immediately focused their fire on the tiny craft, but Jake's piloting was unlike anything she had seen before. Instead of following standard evasive patterns, he seemed to anticipate exactly where the raiders would aim. He rolled and twisted through the debris field, using chunks of wreckage as cover. When the raiders expected him to retreat, he accelerated forward. When they tried to surround him, he dove beneath their formation. "How is he doing that?" Sub-Commander Crix asked. "I have no idea," Zara admitted. Human piloting apparently did not follow the same rules as other species. Jake reached the lead raider ship and fired a single torpedo at their docking bay. The explosion created a breach large enough for his fighter to slip through. Zara lost contact with him as his ship disappeared inside the enemy vessel. For 10 minutes, there was no word from Jake. The raider ship continued firing, but something was wrong with their maneuvering. They were moving more slowly, less efficiently. Then suddenly, the ship's engines went dark. Internal explosions detected on the lead raider vessel, reported the sensor operator. Their power systems are failing. The disabled raider ship began to drift. Without their leader, the other two ships hesitated, unsure whether to continue the attack or retreat. That moment of uncertainty was all the coalition ship needed. Concentrated fire from their weapons disabled the second raider ship and sent the third fleeing into hyperspace. Jake's fighter emerged from the wreckage of the lead ship, moving fast toward the escape pod. Zara watched as he carefully maneuvered alongside the damaged pod and began rescue operations. It took another 20 minutes to extract the survivors and get them to safety. When Jake finally returned to the ship, he was exhausted and his uniform was torn. He had cuts on his hands from crawling through damaged corridors, and his eyes were red from breathing toxic fumes. But he was alive, and so were the 3 merchant crew members he had saved. Report, Zara demanded when he reached the bridge. Mission successful, Commander. The pod survivors are stable and receiving medical treatment. The raider ship is completely disabled. How did you navigate their internal systems? I studied their ship design during the approach. Most species build their vessels with logical layouts. Once I understood their engineering principles, I could find the weak points and the toxic atmosphere inside their ship. I held my breath a lot. Zara stared at him. You held your breath. Human lungs can function for several minutes without fresh air if necessary. It wasn't comfortable, but it was manageable. Sub-Commander Crix looked amazed. No other species would attempt such a mission. That's because no other species needs to, Jake replied. You have better technology and stronger bodies. We have to be creative. Later that night, Zara reviewed the mission reports. The rescue had been successful, but Jake's methods troubled her. He had ignored direct orders, taken enormous personal risks, and improvised solutions that should not have worked. Yet somehow, he had succeeded where standard tactics would have failed. She began to wonder if human recklessness was actually a different kind of tactical thinking. They seemed to measure success not by following procedures, but by achieving objectives regardless of personal cost. It was a philosophy that both impressed and worried her. The next morning brought news that would test her understanding of human nature even further. Long-range sensors had detected a massive enemy fleet heading toward the mining colony at New Prosperity. The real war was about to begin, and she would need every soldier she could get, including the humans who seemed to think that impossible missions were just another day at work. The mining colony of New Prosperity was not built for war. Its domes and industrial complexes spread across the asteroid's surface like a peaceful town, designed to extract rare metals that powered half the galaxy's technology. Now those same buildings were about to become battlegrounds. Commander Zara Vex stood in the colony's command center, studying tactical displays that showed the approaching hegemony fleet. 50 warships against her mixed force of 20 coalition vessels, and whatever ground troops they could muster. The numbers were not encouraging. Estimated time to enemy arrival, she asked. 6 hours, Commander, replied Colonel Amy Brooks, the human officer who had arrived with reinforcements. My people are ready to fight. Zara had requested additional human troops after witnessing Jake Morrison's unconventional tactics. If the humans could think outside normal military doctrine, she wanted them on her side when the impossible became necessary. The colony's population was being evacuated, but the process was slow. Civilian transports could only carry so many people at a time, and the hegemony ships were moving faster than expected. At least 15,000 miners and their families would still be on the colony when the enemy arrived. Standard defensive doctrine calls for a fighting withdrawal, Sub-Commander Crix reported. We establish defensive positions, delay the enemy, advance, and evacuate remaining civilians during the battle. That strategy assumes we can hold them long enough, Zara replied. Intelligence reports indicate they have quantum weapons. If they use those against the colony domes, everyone still here will die. Jake studied the tactical projections with the same focused intensity she had seen before. Commander, what if we don't fight a defensive battle? Explain. They expect us to dig in and wait for them. Standard coalition doctrine. But what if we hit them first, while they're still organizing their assault? Colonel Brooks nodded. Shock tactics. Get inside their formation before they can use their heavy weapons effectively. Zara felt her scales tighten. That would be suicide. Your soldiers would be outnumbered 10-1. Maybe, Jake said, but it might buy enough time to finish the evacuation. The debate continued for another hour as the enemy fleet grew larger on the sensors. Finally, General Vex arrived from Coalition High Command with emergency authorization. His ancient Altarian features were grim as he studied the situation. Commander Vex, you have operational authority. Use whatever tactics you deem necessary. Sir, the humans are proposing a direct assault on superior enemy forces. Then perhaps we should listen to them. Conventional tactics have failed us in every major engagement with the hegemony. As night fell over the colony, Zara found herself approving a battle plan that violated every military principle she had ever learned. The humans would lead coordinated ground assaults against enemy landing zones while coalition ships provided cover from orbit. It was desperate, dangerous, and probably doomed to failure. But it was also the only chance they had. The first enemy ships arrived at dawn, moving in perfect formation toward the colony. Zara watched from the command center as drop pods began, launching toward the surface. Each pod contained enemy soldiers equipped with the best weapons and armor the hegemony could provide. All human units. This is Morrison. Jake's voice crackled over the communications channel. Remember, we're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to create chaos, and by time, hit them hard, hit them fast, and don't let them organize. The first assault began as the enemy troops were still deploying from their pods. Instead of waiting for the invaders to establish defensive positions, the humans charged directly into the landing zones. What followed was unlike any battle Zara had ever witnessed. Human soldiers moved with incredible speed and coordination, using explosives and close-range weapons to maximum effect. They seemed to anticipate where the enemy would be rather than where they were. When hegemony troops tried to form up in standard battle lines, the humans were already behind them, attacking from unexpected angles. Private Tony Martinez, the communications specialist, somehow managed to hack into enemy command frequencies and began broadcasting false orders. Sergeant Lisa Carter used her demolitions expertise to collapse strategic buildings, creating barriers that channeled enemy movement into kill zones. But the most amazing sight was Jake Morrison himself. He seemed to be everywhere at once, leading charges against impossible odds and somehow surviving. When enemy heavy weapons threatened to break through human lines, he would appear with a small team to disable them. When civilians were trapped in collapsed buildings, he would organize rescue operations while under fire. How are they doing this? Sub-Commander Crix asked, watching the tactical display with amazement. I have no idea, Zara admitted. The humans were taking terrible casualties, but they were also inflicting far more damage than should have been possible. Every time the enemy tried to establish a foothold, human soldiers would attack with such ferocity that the invaders were forced to retreat. The battle raged for 8 hours. Hegemony reinforcements kept arriving, but they could not gain control of the colony. The humans fought with a desperation that seemed to make them stronger rather than weaker. When they ran out of ammunition, they used improvised weapons. When their equipment failed, they repaired it with whatever materials they could find. Commander, Jake's voice came over the radio, barely audible through static. We've held them at the main industrial complex, but we're running out of people. How much more time do you need? Zara checked the evacuation status. 4 more hours for the last civilian transports. Understood. We'll hold as long as we can. But the enemy was preparing something new. Long-range sensors detected quantum weapon signatures from the main hegemony fleet. They were going to destroy the colony from orbit rather than continue losing soldiers in ground combat. All units, prepare for orbital bombardment, Zara announced. Seek immediate shelter. The first quantum torpedo struck the eastern mining complex, vaporizing everything within a kilometer radius. The explosion was so powerful that it cracked the asteroid's surface and sent shockwaves through the colony's underground tunnels. More strikes followed, each one destroying another section of the colony. The humans who had been fighting so fiercely above ground suddenly found themselves trapped in a collapsing battlefield. Standard procedure called for immediate evacuation of all military personnel, but the humans did not follow standard procedure. Instead of retreating, they moved deeper into the colony's underground sections, establishing defensive positions in the tunnels and maintenance shafts. When the enemy sent troops to secure the underground areas, they found human soldiers waiting in the dark, fighting with a savagery that shocked even veteran hegemony warriors. "This is insane," General Vex said, watching the battle reports. "They're fighting in conditions that would kill most species." "They're fighting for people they've never met," Zara replied, beginning to understand something fundamental about human nature. "They're not trying to win the battle. They're trying to protect everyone who can't protect themselves." The underground fighting continued for 6 more hours. The humans used every tunnel, every maintenance shaft, every hidden passage to harass the enemy. They set traps, ambushed patrols, and made the invaders pay for every meter of ground. When the last civilian transport finally lifted off from the colony, Jake's voice came over the radio one final time. "Commander, evacuation is complete. All civilians are safe." "Outstanding work, Lieutenant. Now get your people out of there." "We're trying, but the enemy has the tunnels blocked. It might take a while." Zara realized with growing horror that the humans had sacrificed their own escape route to ensure the civilians could leave safely. They had fought so hard to protect others that they had trapped themselves in a dying colony. The rescue operation took another 12 hours and cost 6 coalition ships. But when it was over, every surviving human soldier had been evacuated. They had held impossible positions against overwhelming odds and saved thousands of lives. As Zara watched the humans receiving medical treatment, she began to understand why their tactics seemed so foreign. They were not fighting to win battles or follow orders. They were fighting to protect others, even when protection meant certain death. She had seen battle-hardened soldiers from every species in the galaxy, but she had never seen anything like these humans who became more dangerous the more hopeless their situation became. The field hospital smelled of antiseptic and pain. Commander Zara Vex walked between the rows of beds, her clawed feet making soft clicking sounds on the metal floor. The battle for New Prosperity was over, but the cost was becoming clear. Nearly half the human soldiers were wounded, and many would never fight again. She paused beside a bed where Sergeant Lisa Carter lay with her left arm in a regeneration sleeve. The demolitions expert was awake, staring at the ceiling with hollow eyes. "How are you feeling, Sergeant?" Zara asked. Lisa turned her head slowly. "Like I got hit by a transport shuttle, Commander. But I'm alive, which is more than I expected. You fought with great courage. We all did what we had to do. That's what humans do." Zara continued her rounds, speaking with each wounded soldier. Their responses were similar. No boasting about their heroism, no complaints about their injuries, just quiet acceptance of the price they had paid to protect others. She found Jake Morrison in a bed near the back of the medical bay. His chest was wrapped in bandages, and monitoring equipment beeped steadily beside him. Dr. Sam Anderson, the human field surgeon, was checking his vital signs. "How is he, Doctor?" Zara asked. "He'll live, but he needs to rest." 3 broken ribs, internal bleeding, and severe burns on his arms. He should be unconscious from the pain medication, but he keeps refusing it. Why? Because he's still trying to coordinate recovery operations. He won't accept treatment until he's sure all the wounded are being cared for. Zara looked at Jake's pale face. Even injured and exhausted, he was studying reports on a portable display, making notes about supply requirements and personnel assignments. "Lieutenant, you need to rest." Jake looked up at her with tired eyes. "Commander, the Karathi wounded need different medical protocols than humans. Private Martinez is organizing translation services for the alien survivors, and we need to debrief. The intelligence we gathered about hegemony quantum weapons, that can wait. People are hurt because of decisions I made. I need to make sure they're taken care of." Dr. Elena Rodriguez approached from across the medical bay. The xenobiologist had been working with the human medical team to treat alien wounded. Her usually neat appearance was disheveled, and she looked exhausted. "Commander Vex, may I speak with you privately?" They walked to a quiet corner of the medical bay. Elena glanced back at Jake, then spoke in a low voice. "I've been observing human behavior during this crisis. Something I've noticed is that they process trauma differently than other species." "How so?" "Most species focus on their own survival and recovery after combat, but humans seem to derive their strength from helping others heal. Jake won't accept pain medication because he believes others need care more than he does. It's not just selflessness, it's how they cope with their own pain." Zara watched Jake working despite his injuries. "I have seen many soldiers face death, but I have never seen anyone fight like humans do. They seem to become more effective the more desperate the situation becomes. That's because they're not fighting for the same reasons as other species. Altarians fight for duty and honor. Korathi fight for territory and resources. Humans fight for each other. When other people are in danger, they become capable of things that should be impossible." Over the next few days, Zara spent time observing the humans as they recovered. What she saw challenged everything she thought she knew about military psychology. Human soldiers who could barely walk were helping alien wounded with physical therapy. Jake, despite his injuries, organized recreational activities to keep morale up. When coalition supply ships arrived, with limited medical supplies, the humans immediately voted to give priority to the alien casualties. "This behavior makes no tactical sense," Sub-Commander Crix observed during one of their briefings. "They are weakening their own recovery to help others." "Perhaps," Zara replied, "or perhaps they understand something about strength that we do not." The breakthrough came when she found Jake in the hospital's common area at 2 in the morning. He was sitting with Private Danny Walsh, the medic who had lost his left leg during the underground fighting. Both men were staring out the viewport at the stars. "Cannot sleep?" Zara asked. "Bad dreams," Danny replied. "Keep thinking about the civilians who didn't make it out. You saved thousands of lives, but not all of them. There were families in the Eastern District when the quantum torpedoes hit. We were supposed to protect them." Jake put his hand on Danny's shoulder. "We did everything we could. Sometimes that's not enough, but that doesn't mean we stop trying." Zara sat down across from them. "I have a question for you both. Your species seems to have little regard for personal safety. Do you not fear death?" Danny laughed bitterly. "Commander, we're terrified most of the time. I was scared out of my mind during the whole battle." "Then why do you fight?" "Because being afraid is better than letting innocent people die," Jake said quietly. "Fear is just a feeling. You can act in spite of it. Other species fight for glory or territory or resources. What do humans fight for?" Jake considered the question for a long moment. "We fight for the people who can't fight for themselves, for children who need to grow up safe, for families who just want to live in peace, for strangers who would do the same for us if our positions were reversed. But you barely know these people. That doesn't matter. They're people. That's enough. Zara felt something shift in her understanding. You are not naturally brave. You are naturally afraid, but you choose to act despite that fear. Everyone's afraid, Danny said. The difference is whether you let fear control you, or you control it. And you control it by focusing on protecting others. We control it by remembering that there are things more important than our own safety, Jake replied. When someone else's life depends on what you do, fear becomes less important than action. The conversation was interrupted by alarms throughout the medical facility. Coalition intelligence had detected another hegemony fleet approaching. The war was far from over, and wounded soldiers were being asked to return to duty. Jake stood up carefully, his injuries still causing obvious pain. Guess it's time to go back to work. You are not fit for combat duty, Zara said. Commander, with respect, none of us are fit for combat duty, but people need protection, and we're the ones available to provide it. As Jake limped toward the armory to collect his equipment, Zara finally understood what made humans different. They were not stronger, or smarter, or more skilled than other species. They were simply more willing to sacrifice themselves for others. And that willingness, she realized, might be the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. The next phase of the war would test that theory. High Command was requesting her assessment of human military capabilities for full integration into coalition forces. After everything she had witnessed, she knew exactly what she would recommend. But first, she had to make sure these remarkable soldiers survived long enough to continue protecting a galaxy that was only beginning to understand their value. The ceremony hall at Coalition headquarters was filled with representatives from every member species. Banners hung from the vaulted ceiling, each one representing a different world that had contributed to the defense of new prosperity. But all eyes were focused on the small group of humans standing at attention in the center of the hall. Commander Zara Vex stood at the podium, her formal uniform gleaming under the lights. In her hands was a datapad containing the most important military assessment she had ever written. The future of human integration into coalition forces depended on her words. Distinguished colleagues, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. I have been asked to provide testimony regarding the military capabilities of human soldiers. After months of observation and combat experience, I can offer the following assessment. She paused, looking at Jake Morrison and his surviving team members. They stood straight, despite their injuries, their faces calm but alert. They had no idea what she was about to say, but they trusted her judgment. Human soldiers do not fight like any other species in the coalition. Their tactics appear reckless, their strategies seem to ignore established military doctrine, and their willingness to take personal risks defies rational explanation. By conventional standards, they should be classified as unsuitable for military service. A murmur ran through the audience. Some of the alien representatives nodded agreement, while others looked surprised by her harsh assessment. However, Zara continued, conventional standards do not apply to humans. In 3 major engagements, human forces have achieved victory against superior enemy numbers through unconventional methods. They have displayed tactical flexibility, innovative problem-solving, and a level of personal courage that exceeds anything in my 30 years of military experience. Admiral Kate Rogers, the human fleet commander, watched from the audience with careful attention. Beside her sat Ambassador Luke Taylor, whose diplomatic efforts had made this evaluation possible. The key to understanding human military effectiveness lies not in their equipment or training, but in their fundamental motivation. Most species fight for territory, resources, or survival. Humans fight for each other. This difference in motivation creates tactical advantages that cannot be replicated by other species. Chancellor Zephyr, the elderly Altarian head of state, leaned forward in his seat. Commander Vex, are you recommending full integration of human forces into coalition military command? I am recommending something more significant than that, Chancellor. I am recommending that we study human military philosophy and adapt our own tactics to incorporate their methods. The hall erupted in surprised voices. The idea that advanced alien civilizations might learn from primitive human warfare was revolutionary. During the Siege of New Prosperity, Zara continued, human soldiers held positions that should have been impossible to defend. They did this not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through sheer determination to protect others. When facing certain death, they became more effective rather than less. She activated a holographic display showing the battle statistics. Human casualties were proportionally higher than any other species, but their combat effectiveness increased as their situation became more desperate. This is contrary to every military principle we understand. Jake stepped forward slightly. Commander, may I speak? Zara nodded. Lieutenant Morrison, you have the floor. Jake looked around the hall at the assembled alien representatives. Honored delegates, I think there might be some confusion about human nature. We're not naturally brave or skilled warriors. We're actually quite fragile compared to most of your species. Then how do you explain your battlefield performance? Asked General Vex. We're afraid most of the time, Jake replied honestly. But we've learned that fear is just information. It tells you when something is dangerous, but it doesn't have to control your actions. When people we care about are in danger, we can choose to act despite our fear. But you barely knew the civilians you were protecting, observed a Kurathi representative. That doesn't matter. They were people who needed help. That's enough. Ambassador Taylor stood up. If I may add something, the human concept of duty extends beyond formal military obligations. We feel responsible for protecting anyone who cannot protect themselves. This is what I have learned, Zara said, regaining control of the presentation. Human soldiers do not fight for glory or conquest. They fight to protect others, even at the cost of their own lives. This creates a level of motivation that makes them extremely effective in desperate situations. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. I have commanded soldiers from 12 different species. I have seen warriors who could fight for days without rest, tacticians who could calculate complex strategies in seconds, and specialists who could handle any weapon. But I have never seen anything like Lieutenant Morrison and his team. In what way? Asked Chancellor Zephyr. They measure success not by objectives completed or enemies defeated, but by lives saved. This perspective allows them to find solutions that other species would never consider. They are willing to sacrifice themselves not from duty or honor, but from genuine concern for others. The hall fell silent as the implications sank in. Zara continued her presentation, detailing specific examples of human tactical innovations and their effectiveness in combat. After she finished, the questions continued for another hour. Representatives wanted to understand how human methods could be incorporated into existing military doctrine. Others worried about the high casualty rates among human forces. Finally, Chancellor Zephyr called for a recess. The formal vote on human integration would take place the following day, but the outcome was already clear. The humans had proven themselves in battle. That evening, Zara found Jake sitting alone in the headquarters observation deck, looking out at the stars. His injuries had healed, but she could see the weight of command in his posture. How do you feel about tomorrow's vote? She asked. Nervous, he admitted. Not about the integration decision, but about what comes next. Once we're officially part of coalition forces, we'll be expected to fight in more battles like New Prosperity. And you are concerned about casualties. I'm concerned about the people we might not be able to save. Every mission means someone might not come home. That's the hardest part of command. Zara sat down beside him. You know, I have been thinking about our conversation in the medical bay. You said that humans fight for people they barely know. Yes, but you also fight for your own people. Your soldiers follow you because they trust you to make the right decisions. Jake nodded. Leadership is about taking responsibility for others. Whether they're your own troops or civilians you've never met, they're all depending on you to do the right thing. And what is the right thing? Whatever it takes to keep them safe, even if it means making choices that others might not understand. The next morning, the vote was unanimous. Human forces would be fully integrated into Coalition Military Command, with recommendations for expanded training programs and tactical doctrine revisions. As the ceremony concluded, Zara made a personal request to High Command. She wanted to continue serving with human integrated units, learning their methods and helping to bridge the gap between species. Why this assignment? Admiral Rogers asked during their private meeting. Because I have learned something important about warfare, Zara replied. Technology and tactics are important, but the most powerful weapon is the willingness to sacrifice for others. Humans understand this instinctively. Other species need to learn it, and you want to be part of that learning process. I want to understand how soldiers who seem reckless can consistently achieve the impossible. I want to learn how fear can be transformed into courage through concern for others, and I want to help create military units that combine the best of human and alien capabilities. 3 months later, Zara found herself commanding a new experimental unit composed of soldiers from 6 different species, with humans serving as squad leaders and tactical advisors. The unit's motto, suggested by Jake Morrison, was simple. For those who cannot fight. It was a philosophy that would reshape coalition military doctrine and help win the war against the hegemony. But more importantly, it represented a new understanding of what it meant to be a soldier. Zara had seen battle-hardened warriors from across the galaxy, but she had never seen anything like the humans who taught her that true strength comes not from the absence of fear, but from the willingness to act despite it in service of others. The war was far from over, but for the first time in years, she felt confident about the outcome. With humans fighting alongside them, the coalition had gained something more valuable than better weapons or superior tactics. They had gained soldiers who would never stop fighting as long as there were people who needed protection.